I felt Plow United could have been Offspring huge. Back then, I really, really thought they could have been like the next thing.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Coolidge Records is a label who signs bands that are independent punk rock and other forms of music which Brett and Jack love. Their bands range from all kinds, which include Plow United, The Rusty Nails, Coolidge 50, Homage, I don't really know how to say that, Lancaster County Prison, Speedwell, Gladys, Soccer, Squatweiler, Deerheart, and so many more. I would have more information for you, but that's all that they have on their Facebook page. So good job, guys. I first heard about Coolidge when Andy Spratt purchased the Jill 7-inch in the late 90s, and then many times again because of bands like Plow and people like Alan Rappaport, whose name comes up so much in this podcast that I believe that I subconsciously made a podcast that's just about Alan. Thank you to Danny for the intro to Jack, and thank you to Jack for finally signing off on the t-shirt I designed for your company, which is Bantha Tea Bar, which is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So if you live out there, then you should go drink some tea at his tea shop. When I first started talking to Jack for this interview, we were just talking about my new website, which leads to a few minutes of marketing talk. So it starts off kind of weird, but we start talking about my old band, and I figured I would just let it start from there. So this starts weirdly abruptly because I didn't have a smooth transition, and but this is my podcast, so this is how I fucking want to do it. I got Jack on the phone, and this is what we talked about. Growing up in Wyckoff, New Jersey, interviewing Ian MacKaye, using MTV's mailing labels to get press, the band Plow United, what it was like having multiple bands on the label, working on Sanctuary Records in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I currently live, Danny from Jill owing Jack some songs, and a ton more. Thank you to everyone who has donated to the podcast, especially Derek Passon and Jared Miani. Sorry, dude, I don't really know how to say your last name. But so that's how I'm going to say it. That's your new last name. And along with all the people who have recently bought merch, if you haven't checked it out, go to thiswasthescene.com and hit store. I've got a bunch of winter gear up, which is long sleeve shirt, hoodies, beanies for winter. I've got also hats and t-shirts, and I've got the Wayne Firehouse t-shirt, which I just added that a bunch of people bought, which was pretty cool. So go check it out. Again, thiswasthescene.com. If you have a cool story from back in the day, or if you'd like to add to one of the stories that are told in the interview, you can email it to me at thiswasthescene@gmail.com, and I will put it on my blog. Make sure you include an image that I can put in the header image, and who I should link the article, give credit to. And that's it. And I'd like to give a free shout out to Bagels by Jarrett, because Jarrett has been a part of the Jersey scene forever, and he just started, well, he's been making bagels for a really long time. It's all I see on Facebook. And apparently he is going to open a store that opens, it says on your Facebook page, in November 2019, but I thought I saw you posting that it was already open. So I'm kind of confused here. But anyway, they're apparently great bagels. He's got a lot of reviews. Just go to bagelsbyjarrett.com. It's with 2 T's in his name and 2 R's. It's a great way for me to tell you about that. If I was in New Jersey, I would take a ride to go eat these things because the pictures that he posts are fantastic. And I hope to God you've been putting sea salt or some kind of salt in your everything bagels, because apparently in Raleigh, North Carolina, they don't like to do that, which is just blows my fucking mind. And there is like one good bagel shop down here, and that's it. And I really miss bagels from New Jersey. So good on you. I hope people go to your store whenever it is open, or you eventually put your address somewhere to show that it is open. And that's my plug. Again, just giving some love. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who you know would love some nostalgia. With that said, let's get started.
Like, even my son, who's going to be 12 in September, he writes what he wants to be when he grows up, and he says a professional YouTuber. And it's just like...
That's the way it's going, man.
Yeah, and then he approached me about it a month ago. He's like, I really want my own YouTube channel. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do? And he's just like, I'm not sure yet. And I'm like, well, you have to have a plan. And like I said, Markiplier just doesn't become Markiplier. Like, he planned it and did it, you know?
Who's Markiplier?
he's this guy on YouTube. He plays video games and does stupid shit with his friends, but he's got like 30 million subscribers. Every video he releases, he gets at least 10 million views.
I'm like Googling him now. Yeah, I mean, I would say if anyone asked me, advice on that, especially a kid, I would say like my nephew, he just graduated from high school, and he is completely lost, so bummed out, doesn't know what he's fucking doing. My sister's all like, he doesn't know what he wants to do. I'm like, he's 18, relax.
Nobody knows what they want to do.
But I said, what is he passionate about? And she's like, well, he loves making music. He put out an album out on his own. And I said, oh, well, why doesn't he, the music industry, there's many ways to actually make money if you don't actually make music. You can go on the outside and you can be a producer, you can be a tour manager, and so on. And I was like, just, if you're making a YouTube channel out of that, just be really good at what you do, because you have that luxury at this age where you don't have rent, and just be creating cool stuff and don't talk about the business side of it, where I want to just tell him to be like, go find bands in an industry you like and say to them, hey, I would love to be your roadie. I would love to just go on the road with you.
Guy.
I'll sell your merch, because it'll lead to that career, and you'll get to see firsthand if you want to stay with that.
Right, and like another thing I told my son was that he should take theater classes and acting classes. I said, because these guys, like he likes, what's another one? The Odd One Is Out. He's an animator, but he has all these stories, and I'm like, he's a theater major, like from Arizona State. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah, like, so he knows how to talk to people, knows how to talk to the camera, kind of have to know this stuff. And he was like, oh, okay. Like, he just thought like it came naturally.
How old is your son?
What?
How old is he? 15, you said?
He's going to be 12 in September.
Yeah, I mean, I got into theater when I was young. I saw a buddy of mine was in a play, and I loved it, and I got involved in all theater stuff, and that led to being in a band. Well, it didn't lead to being in a band, but it led to me wanting to perform, and then I found the theater thing was cool, but how could I go create my own stuff? And then the band thing came up, because I've always loved music, but I loved the performance aspect of it.
Yeah. And what band were you in?
I was in Lane Meyer.
Lane Meyer.
Yeah, we were a band. Alan Rappaport was in. He actually named the band.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Alan. All right. Yeah.
Yeah,
was that after True Zero?
Oh yeah, he did True Zero. They broke up. Me and my buddy Chris had this band called Congress of Cow, and our drummer quit, and then we got Sean, who was our drummer after that, and then Alan joined to be our guitar player. And we were playing Congress of Cow songs, and then Sean and Alan were like, well, we really don't want to be this band. We want to be a new band. And I was on vacation, and I got a call from Chris. He's like, hey, Alan came up with a really cool name. He was watching Better Off Dead. And John Cusack's character name was Lane Meyer, so we're going to call it Lane Meyer. I'm like, oh, my God, that's brilliant. And then we were that band with Alan for a while, and he didn't want to tour, so we ended up kicking him out. So I interviewed Alan, and we talked about this whole thing, and he's like, so let's talk about this.
Right. So are you from Northern Jersey also?
Yeah, I'm from Jefferson, and Alan's from Wayne.
Yeah.
We used to go to Flipside all the time. That's how we met Alan.
Me too.
Okay, yeah. So did you grow up in Jersey?
Yeah, I grew up in Northern New Jersey.
I
grew up in Wyckoff, near Ridgewood.
Oh yeah, you were up in the Ritzy area. 208.
Yeah, Ritzy. not my area. Other friends, yes, not my area.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was dating a girl. Every girl I wrote any Lane Meyer song about, she was from Ridgewood.
Oh God, that's Richie.
That was so any town that's off of 208, I just think that was just fucking money galore.
Yeah, I mean, where I grew up in Wyckoff, like it was considered. I mean, we were poor. I mean, my mom struggled. She had 2 jobs. There were some nights where we didn't have dinner. I mean, if we did, it was breakfast dinner. You know what I mean? Like, and it wasn't funny. Like, it was like, no, this is what we're eating. So, Like when I hear people say, "Oh, you live in Wyckoff, you were rich," and I'm like, no, I wasn't.
Yeah, the first thing I say to you is that, and you're like,
Yeah.
no.
It's fine. I get it, but it's just funny when I hear that because I'm always just like, oh, no, I don't
Yeah.
remember being rich.
Yeah, you're
like
like, I had a different upbringing.
yeah. Then say friends of mine, like there was a kid in our school who was complaining that his parents bought him a white Mercedes convertible instead of a red Mercedes convertible, and I just wanted to punch him in the head. Do you want to do like an official intro?
Yeah, so a lot of the interviews I've done, just to kind of jump in and structure this because I just casually start these and people are always like, when the fuck do we start? I'm like, oh, it started from the moment we started talking. And I structure it and I always say it like this, but the whole podcast, and I usually ask if I've noticed this recently when I'm editing episodes. I'll be like, did you listen to some episodes? And I feel like I'm putting people completely on the spot where they're like, well, I've heard episode, and I'm thinking, all right, that's such a dick move on my part. It's not supposed to be, but I've done interviews with, the reason we got to this point is that I started it just talking about the Jersey scene and the punk scene, and every interview, there's always some conversation where someone will come up and like, oh yeah, I forgot about them. And I've interviewed Plow, Brian from Plow, Chuck from Weston, Danny from Jill, Alan Rappaport from Flipside, Eric from Creep Records, and you guys are all within this realm, and you've come up a bunch of times. And when I interviewed Danny, he was talking about the Coolidge split, I even actually had the email up where you emailed him a couple years ago saying, "Hey man, I really want to put these things out on something." And when I got done with Danny's interview, we were talking. I said, you really should put a Facebook page up. He's like, I don't know, no one really cares. And then he did it, and all these people really started to follow it. And he's like, yeah, I got in touch with Jack again, and he still wants to do this. And I found this stuff. So it's cool because it's reopening this box from back then.
Yeah.
And so I was like, do you think Jack would want to talk? He's like, yeah. So this is that. So that brings us up to now. And what I like to do is really do a timeline and talk about the late '90s and talk about that time and where if I was 17 years old, these are all the questions that I would want to know in that time because it was just such cool shit.
Yeah, I mean, we started Coolidge Records.
Wait, we're not going to go there yet, though.
Oh, okay.
We're going to go back, though, because I want to find a timeline of what got you into music, how'd that get you into punk rock, and then we're going to kind of slowly get into how that got into Coolidge and live in that time and what your day-to-day was like, and just random questions will pop up. But I want to go back to the origin story, the Jack origin story, and say when you were a kid, what was the thing on TV, that song on the radio where music caught your attention?
That's a loaded question. I would say
I know.
I was about 10 years old. I can say I listened to The Police.
Nice.
And it was Don't Stand So Close to Me, because that was 1980. So that was The Police, Don't Stand So Close to Me. I bought the 7-inch for it. And there was others music before that, like Ray Charles' Greatest Hits. And my mom and dad had the Beatles records, Rolling Stones records. You know what I mean? So there was that. But really my own was that, and then Rush Moving Pictures. Those were the two big purchases. And
where you bought them, or they were bought for you?
I bought them. I started working when I was 8 years old. I was delivering newspapers at 8 years old.
Okay.
So that was my money, and that's what I used to buy it. And I remember The Police because I remember hearing them either on the radio or it was MTV, because MTV was 1980 also. So it was somewhere in that mix. It's been a while. So that's where I started listening to music, music in general. And I saw The Police when I was 10.
Wow.
Years old with my mom and my sister and one of my best friends who I still talk to a lot, almost weekly. We're still good friends. And we went and saw The Police. And a couple months later, we saw Journey.
Nice.
Yeah. So that was middle school, because that was grade school, 6th grade, 5th grade, just listening to whatever. And I didn't know really about punk rock until high school, later. My friend Jerry Ryerson, I'll never forget him. It was great. He introduced me to punk rock. I mean, he introduced me to AC/DC and stuff, but then we went Dead Kennedys, Minor Threat, Misfits, the Cramps. The Cramps were huge.
Did you feel like you were looking for that?
Yeah,
Like
100%.
Yeah.
I was looking for something more than Yes and Genesis, who I still love.
Don't you find it funny though, like that now I did the same thing where back then when I was a kid I would listen to those bands and it was just too sugary even for me. Like there was no like scariness, and then I was like, there's got to be something more, and I feel like there's a lot of people that felt that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a cheesy movie, but there was this movie SLC Punk.
Yeah.
It's such a terrible movie, but the end, after the guy, spoiler alert, the one guy dies, his friend, and they talk about how they met through punk rock and stuff. Like, we got to stop playing Dungeons and Dragons and listening to Yes and listen to this. And they put on Generation X.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that because that reminds me of was my friend Jerry. Like, that's what we kind of did. And then we started a band in high school. And we didn't know how to play the instruments at all. Like, I didn't know how to play the guitar. I just bought a guitar, didn't know how to play it worth a dang. And we had friends who knew how to play. So they kind of carried us. But he was the singer and I was the guitarist, and it was terrible. And then I moved to drums. Then Jerry left.
Wait, hold on. So you went from not knowing how to play guitar and then said, oh, it'd be easy? Drums.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't know how to play the drums. Yeah, so I did drums, and we were in our high school talent contest. Like, it was like a band, battle of the bands. And we were the only punk rock ones. We did covers, and we did Minor Threat. What was the song? I forget the song now. It was a Minor Threat song. And I just remember all of our friends just like moshing and like hitting each other. And it was hilarious. And we did a version of Batman, the 60s version of Batman.
Oh, really?
I mean, we did like a half-hour set. We had it in us. And like the teachers didn't know what to do with us. We did Dead Milkmen songs. This was high school, so this is 88. And Circle Jerks. Yeah, Dead Kennedys. We did all these different types of songs then. And I loved it. It was so much fun. Like, just... because we didn't care, because they didn't care, because those bands didn't care, so we didn't care. And I watched Erga Music War, if you know that movie.
No.
So this movie came out around 82, 83. It was a punk movie. It was a movie documentary about punk rock bands, and it was like live stuff. So it was like Klaus Nomi, Ecstasy, The Police, but also Dead Kennedys, the Alley Cats, the Cramps. It's this great movie. It's on Warner Brothers now, or something like IRS through Warner Brothers, because it was like the Police put it out. Because I was a huge Police fan, so I just ate everything up by them, and it was just like that. Erga Music War was like mind blowing at the time.
And you were how old?
17, 18.
Okay.
Yeah, and then like went away to university. Joined, because we also had a high school radio station. Now I think about it, we had a high school radio station in Franklin Lakes, Ramapo, and we'd listen to music then. Everybody would just bring in different stuff, so you just listen to all this stuff, and it was just, not just the usual classic rock, Lynyrd Skynyrd, AC/DC crap. Like, you would listen to everything else. Like, we found a cassette of the Butthole Surfers, Brown Reason to Live, and on the B-side was Misfits live, so I listened to that a lot. Yeah, just really...
I sort of point out, I think the one thing that I haven't pointed out in any of these interviews where people are talking about, this is like what? You said this is the 80s or the early 90s?
This is late 80s, early 90s of myself, yeah.
So this is prior to CDs, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this was cassette and vinyl.
I mean, it was when cassette was coming out after vinyl. Like, vinyl was always it, and then cassettes came out, and that's where... there was a thing about where the music industry was getting a little nervous, right, about people making copies and shit like that.
Oh, yeah.
And you have all that federal warning crap on it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I wasn't scared. I didn't care.
But it was like, this wasn't the era where you were skipping around and doing a shuffle. It was you'd hit play, and it was either the whole album beginning to end, and you might fast forward,
Right.
or it was just if you made a mixtape, then you could that would be your shuffle.
Right.
Yeah, I always forget
Right.
like that people don't listening to this like might forget that.
Yeah, I mean, and then I would make vinyl mixtapes for people. Like you'd press pause or whatever, get the next song, do it. Like you want to make sure you hit it right and stuff like that. Yeah, before CDs. I mean, CDs came in, I think, had to have been the late '80s. Had to have been, because I remember Peter Gabriel's "So" album came out on CD. So I had friends of mine had CD. I couldn't afford a CD player, so friends of mine had CD players. I still had cassette and 60s turntable. You know what I mean? Like, because CDs were expensive. They were in the long boxes.
Oh, the long boxes, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when the industry was killing it too, because they were selling replications of. So if someone had the cassette, they actually now would also buy the CD, which was making them like a shit ton of money.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then, fast forward myself to university and all that kind of stuff. And then that was the early 90s when I started Coolidge. And then we started doing the stuff on our own as far as releasing records, 7-inch vinyl. And we did a compilation, because I went to school at Kutztown University in Pennsylvania. That's where I graduated.
Yeah, my buddy went there. My buddy Adam Boy Skinny, who's listening to this, went there. Wait, shit, did he go there? Hold on, I had to make sure.
Kutztown, yeah.
I had a friend who did go there, but yeah, come on.
And then I started the label after I graduated from university and moved to Philly. And we lived in Philadelphia because I was in a band at the time. And that's when I started Coolidge. And I lived on South Street in Philadelphia. And we named it Coolidge because that's the street I grew up on in Wyckoff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Coolidge Records is named after the street I lived on.
Wait, so give me kind of like an example, or give me so this was after college, you said?
Right after.
Okay, so like when you're in college, you're listening to music, you had the one band, and
Right.
you didn't really know your instruments. So was there a point where you actually got good at being in a band?
No.
Okay. So
No.
what was your draw then to it was that the transition to the record label where you're like, look, I really love the music scene and I'm not going to make a living being in a band, so what's the next step?
Right. So what happened? Well, I guess I'm trying to remember. What happened? I think what I did was when we had a band when I was in university. It was a band that we played. We did shows. We didn't do any. We did little to no touring because this was before punk broke.
Yeah.
So there was no Knights of Columbus halls. There was no all-age shows. So we were playing bars. I mean, you're talking northern New Jersey. We were playing bars with shitty metal bands, like hair bands.
Yeah.
Like, it was us, these punk rock dudes, and then all night would be shitty metal band after shitty metal band who wanted to be Motley Crue. You know what I mean? Like,
were you punk rock in the style of Minor Threat style, like clothing, or were you like the Liberty Spikes and all that shit?
No, like Minor Threat. We were like more like, we didn't know what grunge was until like a couple years later. Like we didn't, but that was more for us. Like we listened, like when we heard Mudhoney for the first time, I was like, whoa, like this is me more than say, I guess we were more Dead Kennedys. You know what I mean? Like the look and the style, because we were kind of geeky looking, like Descendants. That's why we did the Descendants tribute. Like, we could relate more to that than anything else.
Yeah.
You know, like Descendants, Dead Kennedys, Circle Jerks. Yeah, we didn't do the spiky shit or anything like that. We just, just wore our clothes. But we would be playing with bands that were just like, oh, God, this was terrible. You know, like, they'd bring their own lighting system and smoke machines and here we are with like a PV amp, and they're up there with their money, like just racks of stacks, and we were just like, what the hell is, like, it shouldn't be like this,
It's kind of like what the punk scene became in like the early 2000s, where it just kind of went back to that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, kind of like where, I mean, again, I'm just like jumping forward. I'm gonna jump back again, but it's like where it went from the rawness of what punk was, and then later on it became glam in like the early 2000s.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, but jumping back though.
Right. And then when I was at university, I interviewed Ian Mackay for a class project.
Wow.
About something, and we discussed the music industry. We had this great conversation back then, just like, and how much CDs actually cost at the time, and how like the record companies were ripping people off, and what I mean, like it was like a really great thing. And met him, whatever, became friends, and then I decided to start our own label when I moved to Philly, because I was in a band. The only way that we could do it was if we started a label, is if we get our own stuff released. Because we released a 7-inch with this guy, it was like Thumbprint Records. He had 2 releases. He said he would sign us, which was hilarious. But then he had no money. So we had to pay for everything on our own. So it just didn't make sense. So it was just like, well, why are we with this guy? So let's just do it on our own. So when we made the 7-inch, we did a 7-inch compilation on Coolidge's very first release. And then we were like, well, what do we do with it now? I'm like, well, we got to go tour. That's what you do. And everybody in the band's like, okay. So we did a tour across the U.S. haphazardly.
How'd you book it?
I booked it myself. I would send cassettes of 3 songs to clubs, because it was only clubs, because there was no all ages stuff. So we had to go to bars. And about 80% of them wouldn't book us because they said we were too violent in the music.
It's amazing.
But like I said, this is before everything. Like, this is before house shows, all age shows. Like, yeah, we were playing 21. Like, our bass player at the time, he was a new bass player. He was 19, 20, so he couldn't even play in the bar. So we had to go to New York City the day before we left on tour. We had to go to New York City, get him a fake ID, and then go on the road. This was Kevin Cooper, and he later was in Wally for a bit, from Westchester. He moved to Philly. Bobby Cork, he was in Bobby Cork for a while. So he was part of that scene.
I love that you had to get him a fake ID to go on tour. It's like,
Yeah.
I was talking to someone yesterday. This is not, it's kind of relevant, but do you ever
Right.
watch Family Ties?
Oh, yeah.
It's like when Michael Keaton, he's like, oh, I got a fake ID. They're like, oh, what'd you get that for? He's like, to vote.
Right. I remember that.
It's like,
Yeah.
it wasn't to drink. It was to do something completely different than,
Right.
but just, they're like, yeah, they do this other thing. But I'm sure it got him to drink when you guys were on tour.
Yeah, like we just, so he had to have a fake ID because he couldn't get into bars. So to play. And then if we did, like one bar was like, well, he can come in and play, but he has to leave right when we're done. And it was like, well, that's dumb, And trying to get money from the clubs at the time was almost impossible. Like I remember one time we played a place in Austin, and we got paid $7. The guy handed me $7, and I just looked at him, just like, for real? Like, $7? And he was just like, dude, that's it. Like, whatever. I mean, I love you guys, but that's it. And I was just like, all right, like.
What is this, the fucking 1920s? Like, what the fuck
Yeah.
am I gonna buy with this shit?
Right, exactly. So and we toured the U.S., and then after that, we came back with the 7-inch comp in our hand. And we didn't make any money. We didn't lose any money, like not that bad. The band broke down, of course, typical first tour punk rock shit. But on the tour, okay, so this is important because on the tour, after we played Philadelphia, we played Delaware at the Barn Door. And that's where we met Plow, who later became Plow United.
Okay.
And they opened for us. And they were amazing. Like, even at the time, they were still in high school. and they were so good. And we traded cassettes. Like, they gave us their cassette, and we gave them our 7-inch. And we listened to that cassette about 90% of the tour. And we loved it. Like, they were, it was great. And then when we got back from tour, I called Joel, the bass player from Plow United. I called him, and that was our second release, was the Plow United Tall Man split. And I feel
like Brian said this in his interview, but go on.
Yeah, like we met. So we did that, and I really didn't know what I was doing yet. As far as putting together a record. Like, I kind of knew from the first release, because I was the one who did the first release on Coolidge. So I said, well, let's put it on Coolidge. Like, I really want to work with you guys. Let's work together. And they said, well, let's do this split. I said, yeah, let's do it, And then just the friendship was there.
What were you putting out? Were you putting out tapes or just 7 inches?
7 inches.
Okay, or CDs, and CDs were also
7 inches to start, and then the money that we made, like the first 10 or 15 releases on Coolidge, the extra money I had, we were able to put out the CD, the Descendants tribute. That was the very first CD we did.
Okay.
It was a Descendants tribute, and I decided to do that. That was 95, 96, and I just wrote to bands. Like, you didn't have internet, you didn't have, I wrote letters to bands and cold called them. Like, hey, I'm doing this tribute to the Descendants, to Coolidge Records. We've got about 10 releases. You want to be in our comp?
I
yes
love
no,
that. That's like been a constant theme with so many people I've talked to on this and interviewed, like labels or anybody or bands. They say they would cold call people. It's so funny hearing that, because from where I am and being a freelancer, I have to call them to sell something, but I feel like it'd be different to call someone a cold call and say, hey, can I do this for you? I feel like they'd be more receptive.
Right. And a lot of the bands, the good thing was a lot of the bands would go record, and they're like, you know what, we'll just bang this out. We'll do this Descendants song, and we'll send you it, So, like, all the bands, like, I remember, like, Bouncing Souls, like, they were recording their one album, and they were like, yeah, when we're in the studio, we'll just record Pervert, I was like, oh, great, and then 3 weeks later, like, and then, like, I was working in the music industry at the time. I had a job in the music industry, so I was working at Energy Records, which was a metal label, and then I switched over to Big Cat Records, which was, like, a British indie pop label, and like, that's how I got Pavement, because Pavement was on Big Cat. And I asked Steve Malcolmus.
You had Pavement on the label?
What?
You had Pavement on the label?
On Big Cat Records, yeah, in the UK, in England.
Oh, wow.
They were on Matador here. So I asked Pavement, I asked Steve Malcolmus, I called him. And I was like, hey, it's Jack from Big Cat. Yeah, hey. I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this tribute to Descendants. You want to be on it? And he was like, yeah, I'll be in. Well, Pavement will be on it. And I was like, awesome.
Damn, that's crazy.
Yeah, and then like 3 months later, he dropped off a cassette at the Big Cat offices.
I'm looking at the website right now, and you have the catalog, and it goes back to CR 0001.
Right.
Is that legit the first release?
Yeah. Is it, which one is it?
It's the various artists. You don't have to be Tom Jones Volume 1.
Yeah, you don't have to be Tom Jones Volume 1.
I thought Your Band was the first release.
No, that was on Thumbprint.
Okay. Oh, that's right. That was that guy's label who had no money.
But our band is on that compilation.
Okay. Wow, you legit have the entire history of the label on your website.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So then during that time, though, I was friends with Plow United, and I would go to Westchester and see, or Philly, and because I lived in Philly for a bit, so I'd go to Westchester once in a while and see these bands, and I started working with, not signing, but releasing records by these bands. And then I started getting known, I guess, in the weird punk world, and started releasing more. Like, I knew Alan from Flipside, and he knew me from Coolidge Records, so he was like, hey, do you want to release our band? Do you want to do this? You know what I mean? So it was always word of mouth. I'd get demos.
Well, talk about how you were getting known. Like, what, you said we're kind of like getting out there. Like, what was that like? Like
Um,
people
it,
just like reaching out to you, or
yeah, I mean, it was weird. I mean, really, what did it on the map for us was a Descendants tribute. That really
Oh, I bet.
put us over because that was because of Pavement was on it, Black Train Jack was on it, Bouncing Souls were on it, the Parasites. So all these bigger bands were on it. So we got distribution through Caroline distribution, because there's all these people I knew from working in the music industry. So they found out that I was Coolidge. So they were like, "Oh, wait, you're Coolidge Records." I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Oh, you're that guy," and I'm like, "Yeah." Because I didn't like publicize it. I wasn't like, "I'm Jack from Coolidge." Like, I was like, "Yeah, it's me, whatever."
Hmm.
I like putting out records that I like. And there's another partner, Brett Boy, who I'm still friends with. He was also helper of Coolidge Records. So it wasn't just me. It was me and Brett. Let me make that clear. Like, Brett helped out a lot. He was in my band, too. He was a guitarist. And he went on to form the Rusty Nails.
Okay.
So, but he was a big part of it, too. We bounce off ideas with each other. But I was more of, like, the spokesperson, I guess. Like, I was like the Ian Mackay
Okay.
to his. He was like Lyle Preslar, of Discord,
Okay.
like behind the scenes. I guess if you want to compare it, obviously no comparison, but you know
Well,
what I
there's got to
mean.
be someone who can be in the front who's going to talk to people, and the person in the background who's like, yeah, that's not my thing.
Right, and Brett's always been like that. Like he's still to this day is like, yeah, that's not my thing.
Well, tell me like about the day to day. So like right before, because was it homage or homage when you put the
Homage,
homage?
whatever.
So homage you put out. So before that though, you've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. You had like 13 CD or 13 releases up to that.
Right.
So like, what was that like for getting the band, getting them to record, putting that shit out, having stacks of stuff in your apartment, or like, what did that look like?
Um. Yeah, because I still kept the Coolidge when I was living in Philly for that little bit. But then I moved. See, what happened was after Philadelphia, we did the tour. We had no place to live, so I moved back home. But we still kept the Coolidge address in Wyckoff as the Coolidge Records address, even when I lived in Philadelphia for that short period of time. But we didn't have any releases. It's when I moved back home and I got a job working for music industry record companies in New York. We kept the address. So my mom's house, was where I kept all the records.
Well, so wait, like the garage, your room, like
My room, my bedroom,
so
literally.
it would be
Filled.
shipped there, and you were
Yeah,
living in Philly and have to go all the way up to Wyckoff to get them.
yeah, for a bit, and
Jesus.
then because the mail order was coming to the house. So when I put an ad in Maximum Rock and Roll, like for the Plow United Dance 7-inch, you would ship it to the address was Wyckoff. My mom would call me and be like, "You got a ton of mail here. You gotta come back and do this." So it's like, okay, and I come back, fill the orders, go to the post office, and then finally when I moved back home, and then we lived in New York City, I moved to New York City, and then I would go home on weekends to do laundry and do Coolidge stuff. So I would do laundry, work at the movie theater, fill orders for Coolidge, and then go back to New York with the orders and mail them all out, because the post office near me in New York City, how was it, Church Street, near the World Trade Center, the post office was open 24/7.
Did you have a disclaimer like, "Hey, orders are gonna go out between a week and a month"?
I mean, you would say, like, somebody would ask for a catalog, and I'd put in the catalog, allow, I think I said something like 10 to 15 days for delivery.
Okay. And that's just it's amazing. And I'm just my mind is trying to go back into that time period where I mean I remember getting bands CDs and inside it would be this fold out black and white catalog and you'd open
Right.
it and then you'd send check or wellhead in cash to these labels and then
Right.
pray that it got there and then it was going to come back to you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was pretty diligent about that stuff.
Were you
Like,
in record stores? Like, I mean, I know. So I'm guessing when you met Alan, you were getting in Flipside.
right. And Actually, we didn't get in I mean, because the Descendants tribute was distributed by Caroline, so that was easy to get in stores. But like our 7-inch stuff was like mail order only.
Okay.
Like, yeah, I think I don't even remember if Caroline did take a couple 7-inches, but nothing ever sold. So, and Rotz, that was the other one. Rotz, ROTZ, Rotz Distribution. That was the big punk distribution in Chicago.
I remember Caroline. Caroline was a big name back then. That was like the thing.
Rotz was the big punk one.
Okay.
And there was one in San Francisco. I forget the name of it. But they sucked. I forget the name. But Rotz was good for a while, and then they went bankrupt, and it went to shit, obviously, because they were starting to go bankrupt. So it was really tough to get money. The worst was what really drove me crazy was people who would write me saying, hey, I'm going to start my own distro in the state of Virginia. I know these record stores. Send me like this. So I'd send them like, not even knowing them, or I'd call them. I'd send them like 10 copies of stuff, 10 copies of everything, and I wouldn't get anything. Like I wouldn't hear from him ever again. One guy, I remember doing this. This was it was in Virginia. He had an invoice from me. Like he owed me like $400 of records, which was a lot back then. And I was just like, I gotta get this. Called him. Oh, he's not here. He's at work. Okay. Call back. Because there's no phone, no text, no email.
Yeah.
This is all phone. And then finally I called and I was like, dude, where's my stuff? And he's like, oh, I sold it. And I'm like, well, where's my check? He's like, oh, I'll get it to you soon. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm coming down. And he was like, what? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to drive down to get it. So I did from New York City, northern New Jersey. I drove down to Virginia. I borrowed a friend's car and I went to Virginia to go find him because I knew his address.
That's amazing.
And like I went there and he wasn't there. Like I knocked on the door and it's like a group of dudes, And I was like, where's this guy? And he's like, oh, he's not here. He's at work. I'm like, well, I'll wait. And I waited for him for like 3-4 hours and he never showed up. And I think they like told him that I was waiting for him. And I never got the money. And I finally got what?
Really? You never got it?
I did get the money. Like I left and I left him a note. And then I think like a month later he sent me a check for half of it.
What was his name? What was his name and address? We'll put it on the podcast.
I forget. I might have the Coolidge Records files where I could find it.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And let you know who he was. But
that'd
he
be
was
amazing. That'd be so amazing if someone's like, I know Brad.
Yeah, exactly. Like he dicked me out of money. And then like at the time, besides Rotz, we were doing Lumberjack distribution.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
What was the process like for, real quick though, because you have all these records leading up to the Descendants tribute, and what was the process with getting the artwork done? Or, I'm guessing you had the same place to get all the 7 inches pressed, so that became like, okay, like we know to send them here. And then like the art, was it like the band sending it to you? Did you have a designer? Like how'd you do all that?
No, the bands would do the art, and then I would put it together, hand cut and paste, and then we'd photocopy it at Kinko's or whatever copying place. A lot of places, because I worked in the music industry, I would just use people's copiers. And then also, which was funny, I interned at MTV.
Oh, wow.
And I was in MTV. I was an intern for MTV Sports. So I would use their copier because I still had, my pass was good for a year. So after my internship, I worked in the music industry. So when I had this stuff, I would go to MTV and use their copier.
Who was the guy in MTV Sports? Dan something.
Dan Cortez.
Dan Cortez. Yeah. Okay.
Nice guy.
All right. Wow. So you're working with Dan Cortez and you're using their copier to keep your label alive.
Right. And I would steal, which was really funny, is because you would send it out to press, and I would use MTV's mailing labels.
Wow.
So people would get in the mail, they'd be like, I got something from MTV. And they'd open it up, and it was like Jake and the Stiff 7-inch.
That's awesome.
So they would review it because it came from MTV. They didn't,
Did that help the label out in any way of like getting just the name out just a little bit more?
Oh, I have no idea. Like, maybe it got to the top of the pile.
That's
You know what I mean?
incredible.
Like, to zines and stuff. Like, I would send it. Like, but to me, it was tongue in cheek humor.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's
And to me, it was
hilarious.
humorous that, because people were like, "How'd you get the MTV labels? Like MTV network labels?" I'm like, "Oh, I was an intern there, and I kept all the labels." They're like, "That's awesome," And I was like, "Yeah, it's kind of a joke, because being punk rock at the time and all that, like you were supposed to be against MTV and not everything there." But they were all like, "Yeah, MTV sucks, man. Ooh, a package from MTV,"
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I would just like laugh at these people. Would get my records from MTV. Like,
What was the requirement? I'm just like thinking. I'm literally just looking at the page right now, just looking at Clem and Meat Jack and Jake and the
right,
Sifs all the way down to Plow's first release, and just thinking, again, it's my brain. And the point of this podcast when I started was just living in that time because I remember what it was like. And again, this is also in the early '90s. This is like what up
right.
to 95, 96.
Yeah, yeah,
So this is before I even really got involved, and all this stuff's happening before I even opened my eyes to this, and it's just amazing to me. Even now, so many, 2 decades later, or 2.5 decades later, that just seeing what was happening, where I'm just a kid in high school, and you're like building this fucking label and going to MTV and stuff,
right.
and it's just wild to me. So I have all these questions like, what were your requirements to these getting these bands on your label? Did you always reach out to bands and say like, "Hey, Dragass, like I want you to be on the label," or was it they'd hit you up and you're kind of like, okay,
Well, like something like if you want to talk like a specific band like Dragass, I worked at Energy Records and he was the head of sales at Energy Records.
okay,
And I liked his band, so I was like, "Well, let's put something out." And he was like, "Okay, cool." So it was mostly people that I was friends with. It wasn't like, "Oh, well, I have to be an A&R guy and search you out." Like Meat Jack, we used to play with them. And then I would reach out to them afterwards and say, "Hey, we were this thing." Like Joel from Plow United was a big resource of a lot of the punk stuff too. For me, like the
okay.
bands that I signed, like he's like, "Oh, you should release this band or you should release that band."
Oh, okay.
Like Joel and Brian, Sean, like those guys, Plow United was like, "Yeah, you should definitely work with this band. I think it would be kind of cool." And I would listen to it and I'd be like, "Yeah, maybe," or "Nah," because usually a lot of stuff would go to Eric
Okay.
of Creep. And
Did you find that there was a bit of a, because I felt like you and Creep put out similar styles of music.
yeah,
Did you find that there was ever a band that you really wanted? Wait, didn't Plow go from you to Creep?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they did.
Yeah, because I think Brian, I talked about Brian.
Yeah.
Did that happen a
They
lot with Creep, or?
not a lot. Um because we were kind of going not in a different direction, we were just kind of going, I guess not music. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say musically, but there was some stuff that we signed that was more indie
Okay.
later on, like more indie rock and then got more country punk.
Hmm.
Um just cuz I got bored personally of like the 3-chord Monty.
Okay.
Like some of it I really loved. But a lot of it, I was just like, I've heard this before. Like, everybody sounds like Plow United to me, but they're doing the best, like,
Interesting. So you had like a progressive ear where you kind of got out of your own way and said, I think I want to. I don't know. Like I'm what's the word? Not progressing. What's the fucking word I'm looking for? Like your taste was kind of going. It was growing. I guess it would be.
right. Like, we were just kind of more, I was just more, I'm not saying Eric isn't, but I was just at the time for Coolidge was more open. I mean, honestly, the idea of Coolidge wasn't supposed to be like a label per se. Like, the idea was just to have, when I first started, I just wanted all bands just to be on the label. Like, they could just put Coolidge on there.
Mm.
Like, it didn't matter to me. Like, they could have been any type of music, and I was fine with it. Like, that was kind of the idea, was like, we're all in this together. It's like punk, like, it didn't matter, like, punk, stereotypical punks. I was just like, well, what's the difference between that and like an indie rock dude? We were all in it together. So why can't we release music on the same label? So we were in all these different directions, whereas like, you have like a standard sound from Fat Wreck.
Yeah.
Fat Records. You have a standard sound, whatever, I forget the Offspring, Bad Religion.
Epitaph.
Epitaph. Like they had a certain sound. And nothing against Eric from Creep, but Creep was kind of like that way too. Like they were kind of like, we are going to be this type of sound and style and bands. And there was other bands, the labels like that too, but we weren't like that. We were kind of more like, well, it's a friend. He's just looking for a label to be on. He can be on our label. Like there's this one band that we have, Us and Them. It's very poppy, guitar-y, jangly, like, not anything like Jake and the Stiffs or Plow United or anything like that. It was like a little bit more out there. And like, I remember Eric once, I'm not going to shame him or anything, but he was like, I remember getting a phone call because when I put out Lancaster County Prison, it was like it was like a alt country, but punk. They were punks who just listened to Johnny Cash and George Jones and that's something. He was like, or soccer, because soccer was more indie rock. He's like, oh, what are you doing, man? Why aren't you releasing more punk stuff? Like, why are you releasing this indie shit? And I was just like, because I like it, like, it's good, like.
I feel like that'd be the same thing though if two bands were friends and they were writing songs and a band wrote something that was a bit different from their style, the other one would say like, what's this direction you're going in?
Right, like, and I'm, and it was fine for us, like. And that's the way I liked it, like Clem was more stop-starty, not as punk. It wasn't straight-ahead punk. So that's what I really, I just liked all types of music. I always did, So it was just like Coolidge was supposed to be the idea of like it didn't matter what you really sound like. I didn't want to pigeonhole us.
Were you living off the label?
No.
Were you making any cash to just pay some bills?
Yeah, I mean, we made the 7 inches. The thing was, the 7 inches made enough money in sales to get to the next 7 inch.
Oh, okay.
Like we would just make enough to get to the next one. So like when that would sell, then we'd get to the next one that would sell. Like the Plow United Weston split 7 inch really sold a lot, though. That helped pay for the Descendants tribute record.
Which was 4 releases later.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like we saved the money.
This is so crazy.
And then the Descendants tribute really made us a good amount of money not to quit or do anything, but allowed us to release what we loved more.
Did you find after that, though, like if you look back at those releases that are, I don't know, 5 or 10 after, did that kind of give you that, like you said, that ability to say, all right, cool, like these records afterwards are there because of the Descendants release or the compilation?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
like we were able to do this because of that, and you could see that in the releases.
Yeah, like you want to say like the money that we made from our tour was money that was able, and me working at a job paid for Plow United or Plow Tall Man. And then that money paid for Plow Dance. And then that paid for Plow United Weston. And all the releases in between, but there was like releases for us that were like not monumental, but like, like turning points, and like the Descendants tribute, and then that was after, so like we were able to do a Jill True Zero split, because we met True Zero when they did Descendants tribute. Then they said, hey, can we do something with you? And I was like, yeah, let's do something. So they did the split with Jill. But the money that we made from that,
Yep.
from the Descendants tribute helped pay for Jill True Zero and on and on,
What was the signing process for you guys?
We just
a handshake or anything like on paper?
Yeah, like a handshake. I did a contract with Soccer.
Why them?
On their second album. I think I did it on their first album. I'm trying to remember. But definitely on their second. And I put in there specifically that they had to tour. They had to play a certain amount of dates in a certain amount of time, or else they had to pay me back for the records.
Was that because they just weren't a band that did that, or they just were lazy?
No, they just, I just wanted to make sure that bands got out there. I thought it was really important at the time that bands toured. So, like, we had to, yes, I made sure I put it in contracts that bands had to tour, you know?
Did you find? Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I just thought it was important that
Oh
they get
yeah,
out there, because how else are you
totally
going to
was.
sell your record?
I mean
You know?
it totally was. I mean at this time too. This is when
Yeah,
this is when you could actually make money. Like bands
right,
could actually make a living back at this point in time.
right. But like Plow United, I never had a contract. Never, because we were such good friends. It was always a phone call and whatever.
What was the
And
release where they went from you to Creep?
it must have been the Dance 7-inch.
Okay, because I remember Brian did talk about that. He had mentioned
Yeah,
it.
because I was okay. So the story behind that, we did the Plow Dance 7-inch, and then I started working for Energy Records. It was a label out of New York City. It was a metal label. They did like Propane, Souls at Zeros, like these metal stuff. And then the owner wanted me to start the punk indie rock division. So I wanted to sign Plow United first. I had them come play, at the time, a club in New York City called Brownies. They played in front of the owner and everything,
Yep.
and they were interested in signing Plow United. And then Plow decided to go with Creep Records, which was way better for them in the end, still to this day. Whatever you can say about Creep is fine. I mean, I'm sure Brian and Joe, everybody has their own different opinion, but it was better than being on the label with me at Energy Records. And they released the albums on Creep, and it was all good. I was upset. I could say this now. I mean, now, whatever. But back then, I wasn't upset that they were on they didn't sign an Energy. I was upset they didn't want to work with me as much. They wanted to stay with Eric at Creep because they lived near him, so they were friends with him. But I was a little bit pissed because I felt like we were doing better than Creep, I guess. Because we had Caroline distribution, we were getting known from the Descendants tribute. So I was just like, oh man, I was kind of bummed. And then I remember when we did the Sadie 7-inch, because those songs didn't go on the Plow United album. And they were like, well, you can have these songs. And I was like, thanks.
You
Really?
could have the Danny DeVito from the movie Twins.
Right, exactly. I felt like, well, that's kind of bullshitty to me, but I at the time, but I was really happy to work with those guys because I love them as people. Like, if Sean called me up now and said I need you to fly to Portland, Oregon to help me out with something, I would.
Wow.
To this day, Brian, same thing in North Carolina, wherever Joel is in Philly. You know what I mean? Like, I love those guys to death, and I would do anything for them just because we built such a good friendship.
Yeah.
But at the time, I felt very slighted,
Well, yeah.
And I just felt like that at the time, they could be bigger. Like, I really wanted them to be big. Like, I was really hoping that they would be like, I felt Plow United could have been Offspring huge.
Oh wow.
You know what I'm saying? Like, weird as it sounds, but back then I really, really thought they could have been like the next thing. They're still one of my favorite punk rock bands to this day. And I just always felt, even back then, that they could be huge.
What was it like having so many bands underneath the label? Were they calling you constantly? Did they, did you have to like figure out how to balance paying them and keeping them afloat in some way? Like, what was it like? Because it's like I know it was on my end. There was four of us, and we had a label, and I remember the demands that we would have, which I didn't think was too much, but I just remember four guys talking to one person and then multiplying that by 10 other bands.
Yeah, I mean, I would talk to these guys. I would talk to these bands all the time. Like, we would talk about distribution. Like, I was honest with them and told them how much money I put into the release, how much did I sell. I would send them a report or just tell them over the phone. I'd be like, you didn't make any money this quarter or year,
Did you feel that, like, did you feel any guilt on that on your end? Did you say, like, hey, guys, if you're not going to go on the road, no one's going to know who the fuck you are? And they were like, hey, man, you're the label. You need to be getting the word out because you're the label.
And I did. And I felt I did the best I could. Like, I would send them out to press, and I would let them know, like, hey, we got a review in Maximum Rock and Roll, or hey, we got a review in Jersey Beat, or, I just wanted to let them know, like, when are you and I'd always say, when are you playing out? What are the next shows?
Yeah.
And because I worked in the music industry, so I saw maybe a little bit more as to what to do, like more press. But some of the bands didn't even do stuff. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't tour as much. It's when we started making CDs for bands that I asked for more from them, like 7 inches and stuff. Like, before Descendants Tribute, I just put the stuff out, and I was really happy to be working with these people. And if they said they were playing shows, they would say, hey, can you send us 37 inches? And I'd say, okay, and send them 37 inches. After the weekend of shows, they'd call me back and say, hey, we sold 10, we have 20 left, can we just hold on to it until the next show? Hey, we're playing in near where you live, do you want to, we'll go meet and go out and go to Denny's afterwards, So it was very casual. It wasn't like so structured.
Did you find sometimes the bands are coming in? I mean, I'm guessing too, like, you're a young guy at this point where
Right.
nowadays, like, I'm 40, and when anything happens later on, if someone says we're gonna go to a show, it's 8 o'clock at night, I'm like, go fuck yourself. I'm just like not gonna go do this. But do you find that back then when bands were coming to town and you have this band that you had signed coming into town, or this one's coming through, or this one's maybe an hour drive, where you had more energy to say, yeah, hell yeah, I'm going to all these? Or did you feel
Yeah.
like, you know what, man, I just really am burned out. I don't want to see another goddamn show right now?
Oh, no. I was going to as many shows as possible as my body would let me. And yeah, if they were, the good thing was too, there was a benefit because we lived in New York City.
Yeah.
And bands would come play New York, so they would crash at our apartment. This is mine and Brett's apartment. We had an apartment together. And we had the records there too. We shipped all the records from New Jersey, from my mom's house, to New York City in the apartment. So we had this little apartment, we shared a 1-bedroom. We had 2 separate beds. The other room was the TV and records and CDs everywhere.
So
piled in the corner.
wild. It's so wild.
And then we would go home. I would go home on weekends and get the mail order, work at the movie theater, get the mail order, do laundry, come back to New York, fulfill the orders that week when we moved to New York. Like, yeah.
It just blows my mind because I remember looking at my life at that time. I'm a 17-year-old living in Jefferson, New Jersey. We're just getting into punk rock. We're going to Flipside. Alan's
Right.
telling us about all these bands. My buddy has the Jill 7-inch. We've got the Plow 7 inches. We got the CDs, and we've got Coolidge records are on it. And to us, it's just this mystery of who is this label, but they put these cool records out. So, the mystery on my side for that whole my entire life until this moment is so crazy, and on your side is like the machine working and what you were doing. So it just blows my mind in these conversations, just getting that fucking behind the scenes. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's like magic to. I guess I'm saying that because when you're doing it, you don't see what's happening outside of the bubble that you're in the apartment or your mom's house of sending these things out and the shows.
Right.
But outside of that, from everyone else's perspective looking in, it was huge. Like, to us, it was this big thing. Like, we'd say Coolidge, we're like, oh, Coolidge Records, or True Zero, or Jill, or Plow
Yeah.
United. This is the way we spoke, and these are the things that made us want to be in bands and play music. So it's kind of cool that you putting records out, all these other labels putting records out, all these bands going out. It just had this ripple effect of other people saying, like, I want to do that, like the same way that you wanted to make a label.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because before, us, there was really not many.
Yeah.
Like, we were like, I'm not saying I was the first, but it was Discord, and Sub Pop and bigger labels like that. There wasn't any like real like small punk labels. Like, you'd have a couple that you would hear about, but mostly, I just did it blind. Like, I called United Record Pressing and said, hey, how do I send this to you? And there was directions on what to do. And, and then like a big thing was, at the time, was this label called Simple Machines. It was Jenny from Tsunami, the band Tsunami. They were
Yeah.
indie rock. And they had a little book called How to Put Out Your Own Record that you could buy from them for $5, mail order.
Genius.
Yeah, and it had all the information on what to do, like what everything meant. And here's the labels. These are the record pressers that you should call, and here's the printing companies that you should call, or use your own, So I remember using that as like a handbook at one point. And then once I started working in the music industry, I kind of got contacts and people that I knew so that I would get better deals, So, but I would still do Coolidge separate from my job. You know what I mean? Like I always kept it separate. Like once 7 o'clock hit or 6 o'clock hit, I would start working for Coolidge. Because I didn't want any conflict of interest. I didn't want to get in trouble. I didn't want to get fired,
I have asked this to many labels that I've interviewed, and it's always the Napster question, where when that started, did that have any kind of effect on you as a label where you saw that, or were you going, you're like, I was just kind of getting by, so I didn't see it.
What do you mean like the label itself?
Yeah, like when Napster came out and your sales went from 7 inches and CDs, and all of a sudden people were downloading music. Did you find that you guys got affected by that?
Well, honestly, like by the time digital was happening more, now it's happening tremendously. We kind of slowed down as a label. The reason why is I moved to North Carolina and working for a record company, and that job took over my life. Like literally 80 hours a week. Like I was working a lot, like 60 to 80 hours a week.
Jeez.
At this job in North Carolina.
Where in North Carolina were you?
What?
Where in North Carolina were you?
In Raleigh.
Oh, I live in Raleigh.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was Sanctuary Records.
Oh, shit.
And they were on, in North Raleigh, behind that salad bar place, there's an office complex, and we were there. Sanctuary Records.
Okay. I'll have to see if I can find
Greens Dairy Road. 5226 Greens Dairy Road. I remember that. That's where Sanctuary Records was. And that label was huge. Like we had Lynyrd Skynyrd, Styx, Kiss, a lot of crazy. It was crazy time. But I was working there a lot. So Coolidge Records had to take a back seat. And a lot of the releases went out of print at the time. This was 2000. This was like 2000 to 2005. And I would still see bands, friends of mine, that would tour still. But a lot of the bands at the time, it slowed down. Like Plow United already broke up once. A lot of the bands that were on Coolidge were done. So, and I didn't really like anything that was new that was coming out at the time. Like I liked some of the noisy stuff, like that was on Gravity Records, like Angel Hair and however you say Click-a-Tat. But I didn't Drive Like Jehu.
Okay.
Like I loved
the screamo-ish kind of shit.
Yeah, I love that screamo stuff. Frodis. I love Frodis at the time, and I just couldn't get the time to find the band, sign them, do the release. I was just so busy. So all I did was just keep up with the mail order. We still kept the Coolidge Records address in Wyckoff. My mom would still mail me what little mail order we had. It was like Descendants tribute stuff most of the time. Somebody would write asking if there was a Plow Weston 7-inch somewhere, and if I had one, I would mail it. I wouldn't even ask for money. I would just mail it. I'd write back, like, if you want to send me $3, cool. If not, it's fine.
Yeah.
So I just got busy with that, and then I started to become a typical adult, like where I bought a house and from my job, and and then I went from Sanctuary Records. They started closing down, so I went to Merge Records.
Was this happening then when you were in Raleigh?
Yeah.
Wait, I'm sorry, but I just Googled where, I know that no one listening cares about this shit, but it matters to me because I live in Raleigh. That place you're talking about, that's literally like a 10-minute drive up Capitol from where I live.
Yeah.
I live in downtown, so I'm just looking at this and like, I know exactly where this fucking is. That's so crazy.
Yeah.
That's wild. So you were down here and you bought a place down here?
I did. I bought a house in a town called Kittrell, North Carolina.
Okay.
So if you go up Route 1, past Wake Forest, past, what is it, Lewisburg?
Okay. Yeah, it goes all the fucking way up.
The next town before Henderson.
Oh, yeah.
Is a small town called Kittrell.
Yeah, it's right before 85, yeah.
Right, and I bought a house there. Lived there for 11 years. And I just couldn't keep... I had all the Coolidge Records stuff because we moved it out of New York City. Because I took it. I asked Brett. I said, I'll take it all. You know, Descendants Tribute, all the releases. And I would do very little mail order. You know what I mean? It kind of slowed down. Because I was becoming an adult.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you were moving on. You were like, this is a point of my
Right.
life. It's, okay,
Right.
That was cool, but, you know, next stage.
Yeah, when then I started working at Merge, because I worked at Merge Records in Durham, I started doing the digital stuff.
Okay.
And started putting everything through, because we did stuff through the Orchard anyway. We always had some of the releases digitally, but I really started pushing it more digitally and less physical. Because I saw that physical was dying.
Yeah.
And it didn't make sense for me to keep pressing Plow United Weston.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, so you did see the effect.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I did see the effect because nobody was interested anymore. Because a lot of the bands broke up. I mean,
But at the same time, though, like, did you see it where all of a sudden you're going, hey, man, the last 4 months, we've gotten like half or a quarter of the orders, or, you know, how did you see it?
I saw it through the less orders. I started seeing more of the digital sales getting up through eMusic, through the Orchard eMusic, and less physical. And it didn't bother me because this is the trend. You know, this is what's happening now. It's going to digital. And yeah, so now Coolidge is a digital only, where I'm taking bands that I loved back then or today, whatever, and taking their whole catalog and releasing it as like a cheap price.
I've seen that trend. We just signed with I Surrender Records, and that's Rob from Midtown, and they're doing the same thing. They're like, look, you already have this out from back in the day. We could put this on Spotify and, you know, just keep track of the points and things. I'm like, yeah, that seems so much like better. So do you have to buy the royalties, or did you already have them? Like the digital releases you're doing now?
I had, well, like Plow United, the Dustbin of History, when I released it on CD, I think it was a couple years later, we did it digitally, on digital. And the sales for digital was really good. Same with the Descendants Tribute. Like, it's out of print. Like, everything's physically out of print now. Like, there's nothing. It's all digital. But I saw it coming because I worked in the music industry, so I saw it coming probably before others. Probably. I don't know. But, like I said, because we slowed down anyway, like, I didn't need to keep things going. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because it just didn't, because I was like, well, we're slowing down anyway with releases. I wasn't signing anybody new. But now, like I said, like, we do releases of bands. Like, I started this project, like Coolidge Digital, years ago now. Like, I want to say, I don't know, like, I can't remember when it must have been like Clem on the catalog. Like, that was the first release we did digital, or no, Speedwell, somewhere in there we did, like.
Yeah, you've got Kingdom of Rust, Speedwell, The Rusty Nails.
Right, so Speedwell was the first all-digital release. It took us years for them to finally get their act together. But that's the thing. It's like a lot of these bands take forever to get their stuff to me. And it's fine. Like, I don't worry about it. Like, Danny from Jill, I've been talking to Danny 4 or 5 years to get this Jill compilation out. I approached him years ago. Like, when Facebook started, like, you know, when Facebook's been around for 10 years, but,
Yeah.
you know, we were talking, I'm like, hey, let's do a Jill compilation. Like, that had to have been now like 6 years ago.
I'm going to take a little bit of credit with this just because we talked about it, and in the interview I'm like, why would you not get this to him?
Right.
And he hit me up the other day and he goes, "Hey man, we think we found the Mojo Records 3-song Hollywood demo.
Right.
Jay made a copy for a friend all those years ago, and he still has it. At least he is 90% sure." So he was telling me this. I go, "Great, put that shit out." He goes, "Yeah, got to digitize and mastered. Gonna go on Coolidge discography.
Right.
Not 100% if this is the recording on the tape." Yeah, so it's like I've been like honestly on the back end, I've been pushing him. I'm like, dude, it's so fucking easy. Just and I'm like, and Jack wants to put it out. Just fucking give it to him. Like, do it.
Right.
He's like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I've been asking these bands for years to give me their
Well,
stuff.
I just
Like,
don't
just,
think that they think that it's relevant anymore.
but it
And
doesn't matter. See,
right,
that's what
exactly.
like, that's the thing I was trying to
But it
explain to
is
the bands.
relevant.
Like, that's what I try to explain to the bands, that it doesn't matter if it's relevant or not. Like, people still want to find your stuff,
Right.
like, years from now. And digital's the best way right now to get it to those people. Like, like, I just, like the band Algebra 1. Like, I never knew them before. I knew their songs. Like, I love their records. And I reached out to them, just cold email, like, "Hey, this is Jack from Coolidge Records. You might remember me from." Like, I sounded like, a Simpsons character. And I would be like, "Hey, why don't you put out all your catalog?" And they'd be like, "Oh, we didn't think anybody was interested." "Well, I'm interested. Let's put it out. I'll pay for the mastering. I know I'm not going to make a lot of money. It's fine." Like, but it needs to be out. It needs to be documented. See, that's the way I felt. I still feel like a lot of this music should be documented, and it just seems like a lot of it gets lost in the piles of life.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, it's nice to have the original vinyl of the Jill True Zero split for punk rock collectors. Fine. Go to Maximum Rock and Roll's house in San Francisco. Go to their place where I've been there, and just look at all the vinyl as like a museum piece. Like, but to hear the music, like, it's good to have it on digital. I just think it's important that a lot of these artists do this. Even if it's your band from 20 years ago and you're like, "Oh my God, we sounded like crap." I'm like, yeah, but it's like, it's fun to hear it again. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, again, it's also and when Danny got the Jill page up, the Facebook page up, we literally got off the phone and off the interview like this, and I think within God, dude, 30 minutes, an hour maybe, he goes, "Dude, yeah, the Facebook page is up." I'm like, "There you go."
Right.
It's so easy. And then yeah, we have I was talking to Alex from I Surrender the other day. He's like, "Yeah, man, like we want to get the other Lanewire thing out." And I'm like, "Yeah." So but then on my end, I actually have the CD that was pressed back then, and I'm just trying to figure out how to get the damn thing burned so I could
Right.
give him the release. But then we figured out where it was mastered. So it's this whole like
Yeah.
breadcrumb trail to get back to the masters if you can. But then it's like you get on Spotify, all you need to do is pay the monthly fee,
Right.
and you have it hosted here, and it shoots it out to Spotify.
Right. Like, I've been bugging Alan from True Zero for years to get me stuff, and he just won't do it.
Well, now I'll
Whatever.
get on his case.
Yeah. I mean, and I got on, like, Weller from Bobby Cork, the band Bobby Cork. I love that band. And I was the one, I don't know if they give me credit for helping them with the name, but I was like, "Dude, let me release all the Bobby Cork material." Like, and they were like, "Okay." And it's been 5 years. It's like, what are you doing? Like I released all the Tall Man stuff. I think Tall Man was the first full digital only release that I did.
So if I go on Spotify, I can find these.
Maybe
Okay.
through the Orchard. I don't know. Maybe.
The Orchard. Okay.
I'm going to start putting stuff up on Bandcamp soon.
Yeah.
That's the next thing, is to get it all up on Bandcamp. I
Well,
haven't done that yet.
yeah, I mean, like that, or like the Spotify thing is just because they have an app. A majority of people have the app on their phone, so they can just go there and make a playlist and drag over a song and
Right.
things like that. It just makes more sense because it's all about fucking convenience now, you know?
Right, yeah. And, like, I'm trying to release the Stress Boy stuff. That was a band from New York State. I finally got it mastered. It took 2 years to get it mastered because it was all over the place. And all I have is a cassette.
Oh wow.
and there's no like track because they put filler in between, and it took a long time, and it's finally done. So I got to get that together. But I'm talking to other bands that I'm friends with that I knew throughout the years, like, hey, let me release your stuff, So it's just taking time, and I'm patient with it. Like I said, I mean, I've waited this long. I'm a very, very patient person, and because for years I was in the music industry, you have to be patient.
Yeah.
And so getting this stuff out, I just feel like it just needs to be out. Some bands have told me no, they don't want it out on digital, just because for their own personal reasons, and I respect it, and whatever. Like I've tried this one band, Lincoln from Philly, hardcore band, the 90s. Love their stuff. Just never, I found him. He lives in West Virginia. I don't want to put it out. Or if I will, I'll do it when I want. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I'll ask him like a year later or a year from now. Hey, I noticed you haven't put anything up yet. Let me put it out.
Sometimes it just takes that right moment in time, and someone says, "Yeah, we'll do that." Well, yeah, sure, why not? Like whatever my hangups were, they don't exist anymore.
Right. Like I'm just trying to reach out to all these bands that I worked with too, like on the compilations, like the Coolidge 50 compilation, the Descendants tribute. I'm reaching out to those bands. At first I look to see if they're online, and if they're not, then I reach out to them.
Yeah.
And ask them if they're into it. And if they're not, I don't get mad or whatever. I say, okay.
Dude, I will be. I am like fucking resilient with people. I'll just hit them up and they don't reply. It's like with us, like getting on this interview. Like I am resilient. I'm like, hey man, when are we doing this?
Yeah.
Let's go. And because it's just asking until someone's like, okay, I'll do it, or someone's just like, look, I don't want to fucking do it. I'd say, okay, I will ask you in about 6 months.
Right. No, I mean, I'm happy to do the interview because it's funny just to reminisce and think about this stuff. I just get so busy.
Oh yeah. Oh, trust me, man. I mean, we're gonna what I'm looking at and being. There's an interview I'm doing in a couple weeks where the guy is. He goes, well, yeah, we're gonna do it at 8:00 at night. I'm like, Jesus Christ, man. Like, come on, it's so late. But then as soon as I get in, I love it.
I have an 11-year-old son, so if he was with me, I wouldn't be able to do the interview until midnight.
Yeah, I completely get that with people. It's just trying to finagle that, and it's worked out. But yeah, I mean, everyone, as we're getting older, our schedules, we are just they mean more to us than finding that time. But when we do, we're like, oh wow, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm really appreciative of it. It's just funny, like, because I do have to go hear the podcasts, what these people said about me. Not that I.
It's always been good.
Not that I'm really worried. It's just kind of funny. I would, it would be funny to hear what they say.
Yeah, just go listen to the Alan interview. Listen to Brian's from Plow. Let's see.
I really want to hear Brian from Plow.
Yeah, Jill. Listen to Danny's. Good.
I'll bust on Danny, but and Alan too. But yeah, I do really want to hear them, and just I'll do that. I just to know what they said at the time, because like Eric too, because some of the shit that they've done, I've done, that we talk to each other. I'm sure we've talked shit about each other back then.
I don't even honestly remember any shit. I think the funniest thing, I think Eric said something in regards to Plow when they got back together in 2015 or 12 when they released it, and Eric was kind of like, they kind of just missed the boat, or he said something like, it was just bad timing or something.
No,
and then I think Brian hit me up. He's like, God damn it, Eric.
Yeah. Plow United, I felt like they are the smartest ones in the room. You know what I'm saying? Like, of all the punk bands. Because they broke up at the right time for the right reasons. They got back together at the right time for the right reasons, for themselves. It wasn't pressure from anybody outside of them. Like, and I totally love and respect everything they do. Like, and the fact that they came back reunited in 2012, I felt it was right. I felt it was funny. It was good. and the reasons why they broke up at the time was really great. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have any. I thought it was good, and then the fact that they're doing stuff now and then, I think it's great. I hope they keep doing it. I hope they still keep doing stuff as a band. I know it's tough because of their locations of all of them.
Oh yeah, I mean,
they
make like a triangle around the country.
Yeah, literally. But I mean, they don't. They could have been offered a lot of money at the time, and they said no. And I know they didn't make a lot of money. They could have, but that's all hearsay and here and there and talking crap. But but they're a smart band and still are to this day. I don't know, like some of the other bands that I worked with on Coolidge, I all love them all as people. I still, like, if they just called me out of nowhere, and needed help or whatever, I totally would help them out as best as I can. Like if they ever needed a place to crash or whatever,
Yeah.
Because it was like if Alan from True Zero called me up and said, dude, my wife's leaving me, whatever, I hope none of this happens. I'm just saying, and he has nowhere to go. I would be like, dude, come to Pittsburgh. You can crash in my house and, crash in the apartment. I have an extra room and you can figure some shit out,
Yeah.
And that's the thing with the label was like more of like that. It was more of like a friendship bond, I think, than more like business.
Yeah, I think there was a couple labels back then that had that sense where, like I interviewed Mike Park from Asian Man, and he was the same way. He was like, I was a handshake. He's like, I wouldn't want them sticking around if they didn't want to. So why
Right.
I don't understand why labels would do that.
Right.
I mean, you can understand why labels do that because labels are going to treat it as a business. People have different morals or different views on things, and it's just two perspectives. But yours was, yo, man, I'm doing this for the friendship and the love of music and having a good vibe. So that's your style.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I still do that with these bands when I'm doing this digital stuff. There's no contract. It's just like, I'll pay for the mastering. You approve it. We put it out. If it makes money, great. And if it doesn't, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like I'm not worried about it as long as we get it out and out there to people. And that's the thing. Cause you will, I mean, I'm not looking for sales. Like never really was about sales. It just happened that some would sell, I didn't do the Descendants tribute to make money. I did it because I love the Descendants and I love those bands that were on the Descendants tribute.
Yeah.
But
I think those are the things I think that have more success is when you do it strictly for that passion and then people get it and they're going, man, I would love that too.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Well, cool, man. Well, I am going to wrap this up because I know, you probably have shit to do as well.
Yeah,
I don't want to keep you out of it.
Past 8 and all that. I got to close the tea shop and.
All right, so 2 questions before I stop this. What would you like to plug?
Oh, I have no idea.
So it's funny. That question always catches people off guard.
Yeah, because it's not really about plugging anything.
Well, it could be about you. It could be about someone else.
Yeah, I mean, I own a tea shop. I co-own a tea shop in Pittsburgh now, Bantha Tea Bar. It'd be great if people came by and said hey, and if they want to talk music about the Coolidge stuff, whatever, punk, I'm more than happy to sit there and talk to people about it. It's Bantha Tea Bar, like as in Star Wars, the Banthas that the Sand People ride.
Nice. It's a nice website, actually.
Yeah, Bantha. Thanks, Bantha Tea Bar. Come by, say hey.
Go follow on Instagram as well.
I'm on the gram and the book and the Twitters and no Twitters, but whatever Tom says, we do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And all right, so the last question, I asked this of everybody who's on the podcast: what scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
I do it yourself. Still do it yourself, like DIY. You don't need a bigger corporation to help you. Like, it helps pay the rent or your salary, but if you know, like I still try to do everything. Like I work, like the tea shop, I kind of parlayed my music industry experience to the tea shop, where it's like I work with local vendors, as local as possible. I try to keep it as cheap as possible. You know, I still try to pay my employees fairly, you know. So it's just doing it all myself, you know. Well, I have a partner, but you know what I mean. Like we do it DIY. Like I think that's still really important. Like that still like holds true to me and like the people that I'm friends with and stuff and associates. Like, and it's so funny. Like I got that DIY ethic from a Peter Gabriel song on his second album called DIY. Not from punk. It was from Peter Gabriel. And then I said there has to be, like we were talking about earlier, how there's more to this music and life. And it like, that's when I started finding punk. But like he had a song called DIY. So I just, you know, I follow that attitude still, like to try and do it yourself, to go out and do the things, you know, try it. What's the worst? It doesn't work out. Like, you know, you got to fail. Everything, all the releases we did on Coolidge were successful. So, yeah, I would go with that. That's what I'll stick with.